So let's jump over to Shroud the Avatar.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah, well, so when we, a lot of you and I sat down and were really kicking off Shroud of the Avatar, you know, I reflected on my past work on, say, the Ultima series to think about, you know, when do I think it went well, when do I think it suffered, and what were the structural elements that made it either succeed or struggle. And at least in my personal estimation, I look at some of the middle Ultimas, 4 through 6 or 7, as the best told, the best finished Ultimas. And of those, if you're specifically talking about story, I would actually say, for those of you who know Warren Spector, who was my producing partner on a number of Ultimas, I actually think that the story was the strongest in the Ultimas where Warren was my production partner. And mostly because he's such a good storyteller. And as much as I think I have a good sense for the high concept of the story that I want to tell, I recognize that you know, the products are much better when you have someone that is ultra confident in their helping on the story aspect. And in this case, as much as I would, you know, and look forward to working with Warren, you know, again in the future and predict that good odds it might happen in the long scheme of things, he was unavailable at that time, and simultaneously, we've been constantly trying to figure out what the big collaboration that we would get a chance to work on might be. And so it was a great opportunity for me to call up Tracy and go like, how'd you like to come, let's go build something new together. And unfortunately, Tracy accepted. And part of this process, I want to describe kind of the joy of the early part of that process, because we hadn't ever directly collaborated on literally the same fictional content before. And collaborating, whether you're programmers working together on a piece of code or story, writing together on a story, even if both people are very skilled, you still don't know if you're going to have a process that and creative ideas that will be compatible. It could fall apart either on process or on vision. And so you go into it, you know, with some stepping lightly, and you know, hoping that that things go well. And one of the first things we did is we did the book that many of you have with you related to the Avatar, to do the backstory, because we both had the. In fact, one of the first things we did was talk about process and how we tell stories. And actually, I got a great lesson in storytelling from Tracy, and I passed on some of my thoughts about how I structure stories about virtue and how I interpret those virtues, and kind of what I wanted to make sure we ended up with in the main story arc, and what things were easy to be in a game mechanic and what things were, I felt, not going to be easy to do in game mechanics. And then we sat down to block out the story related to the Avatar. And when we went through blocking out that story, I felt, for the first segment of the journey, like a reasonably equal participant. Meaning, while Tracy would often do the original blocking, I would make significant commentary on some of that early blocking. I would actually move pieces around or say how, you know, I didn't really think this part of the story really exemplified this particular virtue in the way that I interpret it, and so we would move and shuffle and move and shuffle, and I'd even make some counter suggestions on actual prose here and there. And so I felt by the time we had the first draft, I thought, when I read it, I was going like, wow, that reads, by my standards, that reads really good. And you know, by my standards, that's a really nice story. And then Tracy took it away to say, okay, I'm now going to take this draft and I'm going to go write the final prose. And when he then handed me back the prose, just the first chapter, when he handed it back to me, I started in reading, and at first I went, I don't recognize these words, because you know, my draft was just bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. It didn't have the let's set the scene. It didn't have the let's rewind in time and make sure you really, let's pull you in before we start moving forward. And suddenly, as I read that prose and then began to see parts and pieces that I was familiar with, I realized how brilliant a writer this guy is. It was so much better. It was so much better than I could have imagined that the book would be, even having helped draft it after Tracy put the magic on it. And so anyway, I would like to thank you for that book that I get the joy of having my name on, when y'all and I know that while sure I did have some significant impact in the structure, the original pieces of it, wow, this guy's work is, I think, exceptional, and I hope you've enjoyed the book too.
Thank you, Richard. You're such a liar.
I know, so.
Richard, it's been interesting because, of course, I see it from a different perspective, and for me, I've come to appreciate that Richard has, as you already know from all of his work, has an innate sense of story. He is a natural storyteller. And tells story beautifully, and structures story beautifully. And not only does he structure the story beautifully, but the underpinnings of the story and the foundations of the story. He's incredible at doing that. And so the foundations and the bones of the story and how it all works together, you're brilliant at that. And I loved working with you because of that. You also, because of your years of experience, have an understanding as to how story fits in the game environment. And while I've done a lot of stories for game, and I've worked in a different set of environment, it was a whole education process for me to come to learn and understand the specific strengths in the computer environment and the MMORPG environment that needed to be satisfied in terms of storytelling. So, I don't want you to. I don't want to leave you with the impression that Richard penned a couple of words in an outline and then I went off and wrote War and Peace. That's not even close to how that worked. Richard and I worked very, very tightly on that, on the structure and the story, just right up to that to the point of smithing out the prose. And the story that's in there is the story that you and I wrote together. And that's why we're both on the cover. We're partners in this, and I've never seen it any differently. And I've always seen it actually as an equal partnership. So there.
well, and just like you got to have the final word on what ended up in print, we get to have the final word on what shows up in the interactive part. For better or worse. Mm-hmm. So when Tracy gets a chance, so any of you that are playing Shroud of the Avatar know that the lagging piece of finish is the story, and that is by necessity. By the way, the story helped define what features needed to be there for allowing the story craft to manifest. But until all those features are present, you can't really link the story on top of it. So we've and I'll go back more into the detail of the current status of Shroud of the Avatar, but just to talk about that process for story, we've had, after he blocked out and he went and finished the story that is in the book, we did a similar structure for the story that we told in the game. Fortunately, however, nobody had to go make the final prose. It remained in the Richard Garriott area of comfort bullet point list. And that still to this day is a living document on our Google Drive at the office, and it slowly gets updated with the practical realities of one of the most challenging areas of the story that you'll probably go like, wait, what did they do to my story? When you get to it, the game is one of the three titans that you have to meet, the Titan of Courage, a guy named Grannis. He had he still has a pretty complicated family history and set of intrigue associated with his two sons and a daughter and some of their advisors and some bad things that happen. Very complicated bits where a person has to come in the scene, make a comment, go leave the scene, somebody might be dead, somebody might be alive. We've got to keep that status straight for all of you who are playing it, which means we have to flip into custom private instances periodically to make sure you don't see somebody that's supposed to be dead, et cetera, down through this long list. And those are the kinds of things that are part of the living document where someone of the coders will say, look, I see you got this blocked out, but we're not getting there. There's no way that you can have that character either be dead or show up in this scene or be there because here's some other structural reasons, either because of story or because of technology, that won't work. And that's when me and a couple of the in-house writers sit down and go, okay, how do we unthread this one, Tracy? And so that's the hard work we're doing right now, as we're now on that last push, which is really for putting story in.
Well, writers and designers love to put stuff in that's impossible to execute.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the stage direction that says, from off stage is heard the sound of a headless scream. It's easy to write, but how do you do that? I mean, and so, Laura and I once built a house, and it had a round turret in it. And the architect, when he drew the plan, he had his little compass, right, and to draw arcs with. So he drew the circle of the wall, and then he put like 8 windows in this curved turret, and all of the windows were curved because he could draw it really easy.
With the compass?
Yeah, with the compass. And my contractor came to me afterwards and said, if you want curved glass in here, it's going to be $8,000 a piece just for the glass, never mind the frame, and they won't be able to open, and they won't be double insulated.
And the repair costs.
And the repair costs on those when the kid throws the ball through the window is going to be, or we could just straighten the line here and put in nice Pella windows. And I said, let's just straighten the line out. So whenever we talk about this, I think about me putting in curved lines and everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that all is great. So let me give you where we are now with Shroud of the Avatar. So Shroud of the Avatar kicked off just over 3 years ago with a Kickstarter. And how many were involved in the Kickstarter, by the way? So more than half of you. That's great. And
I still haven't really played it yet.
Soon, your time is coming very soon. We are in the final.
I realized I could. I just been waiting.
Which is perfectly fine to wait. In fact, and if the story is your main reason, then it's still perfectly reasonable to wait. And but what we've done in those intervening 3 years is we have not only continued to have people both play the game and back the game, but we've been working very closely with the community, many of you, to help refine and define exactly what the final product will be. And so the final product has expanded what the totality is, which is one of the reasons why it's still in development and not out the door. But by the way, I think that's in totality a very good thing, because the original specification was be pretty thin, as would have been required by the original modest budget. And we went out trying to raise $1 million on Kickstarter. We raised $2 through the Kickstarter process, and we just 2 weeks ago crossed $10 million in backing. Thank you. Yeah, thanks all of you for that. For those of you who are playing the game now, you'll recognize that we are all of the major subsystems of the game now exist. As far as I can remember, I might be wrong on 1 or 2, but some of them are thin. For example, if you look at the crafting sections, crafting has, in certain areas of making weapons and armor, there's tons of recipes within them that are being refined still over time. But there's other areas like fishing, which is 1 icon still, I think, at the moment. I think fishing has 2 below it now. All right, 2. So, it doesn't have much of a tree yet. And there are some of those harvesting or refining skills that literally still only have 1 icon. And so those trees need to be filled out. The recipes still need to be filled out. But the system is now present, and we're tuning them into the other systems. Combat is now at least has a strong foundation. I would say it's not necessarily particularly well balanced, and I think the UI is still incredibly rough. We've kind of changed some major aspects of the UI recently, and we're sort of in this awkward mid space where the old one is sort of broken and the new one isn't really working that well yet either. So we still have some work to do on combat by all means. If you look at the maps in the world, we did, to let everybody who had player-owned towns get in and get property, we cloned a lot of the scenes, both the scenes that would have housing as well as the adventure places to go find resources. But those clones are not what we intend for the final by any means. It just allowed us to let you put a house down somewhere well, we're then now going back and we're in the process of uncloning all those same scenes that are, again, unique and match the story, and resources are scattered where they ought to be. But the reason why we put that push on that included all this cloning and to allow people to claim property, that one of the biggest things people, in fact, many of you may have debated, was whether we should have gone persistent ahead of finishing the story all at the same time. And the reason we did is both practical, there's a litany of reasons. Frankly, we needed to, is the bottom line. And what I mean by that is that we had all these people, until we went persistent, by the definition of not being persistent means that we erase the database of players every few months. And so if you are playing with us during this process, if you get reset every third month, it's pretty disappointing to have every castle, house, built thing you've crafted, decorations put on the wall, poof away, and you start the whole thing over again from scratch. And so every quarter we'd get a little fewer and a little fewer and a little fewer people coming back because you're wiping them out all the time. And we also had lots of people saying, I don't want to start until you at least reach persistence.
That was part of the reason.
And there's people who say, not only do I want persistence to be there, but I want the story to be there, which is also perfectly legitimate. But we felt that we needed more people in playing because that helps us test the game. We felt we needed more people in playing because it also helps us fund the game. And we felt that we could actually then refine the storyline faster to finally deliver on that if we had both the money and the people putting in the hours. And so that's why we did the persistence now. We could, and we needed to. And so that was the intersection of those two things that created that moment. And so now, between now and I've been pushing people to try to make it by the end of the year. We're not going to make it before the end of the year. I have reluctantly kind of given in to Star that for us to get the critical mass of what we really want the game to be like as the first ship is going to now be in probably Q1 of next year. But what that will be is all the skill trees filled out. One of the big missing pieces right now is, for me anyway, is all the weather and astronomy affecting things like crops and harvesting, and that going into the recipes for food, and food, proteins and carbohydrates and fats all affecting your stats going forward, including beer making and spirits. And so all of that whole pantheon of crafting that is not combat related, other than helping your attributes, is one of the big missing pieces to me, and that is now on the big push, as well as the story being the other aspect of the big push. And so for those of you that are in playing, it's interesting that when we first went up on Steam, which we did for practical reasons to get some more users, it was interesting to see the difference in mood and mentality between the people who just found us on their own, which probably many of you represent, and the people who found us first via Steam. And I'm curious, did any of you find us first via Steam? No, so it might be one of you in the back. So what's interesting about the people who found us first via Steam immediately is they were haters.
Yes.
Universally. So the people that found us directly were people who kind of went, hey, I started with a room with a chicken and a chair, I get it. Right. The next month I have a house, the next month I have combat, it's getting way better, faster, month to month. The people who join us from Steam, even though it's early access and everything in early access isn't finished, immediately go like, what the hell is this? This game ain't finished. It doesn't run worth poop, and it crashes all the time, or the art is ugly, or whatever, or there's no skill, or the combat's out of balance, or whatever their complaint is, which are all true.
Where's the first giver?
But they immediately start writing us these just really scathingly horrible reviews. And so our marketing, if you go to our Steam page, the first line of our Steam page literally says, do not buy this game. Yes. That is how we market the game, is with the line, do not buy this game. Yet we still get scathing reviews right after that. So people see that, still buy the game, and then still write these scathing reviews. And we actually have to do not buy the game. We actually elaborate on that. We say, because you first read all these negative reviews. If any of those say anything to you, don't buy it, because that's how you're gonna feel. If you're gonna feel like, oh, just don't come. We don't want you.
And they still
And they still come, and they still write negative reviews.
Complain.
Still complain. It's like,
people won't read directions.
and
They didn't read that stuff. No. They skipped
yeah,
right over
they
it.
skip over it. And then and also we recently had an MMORPG review with the same sort of thing that just came out. And we're like, why are they bothering to have people come try to review it like a finished game? We're completely above board that this game is not finished.
I think we changed the line. We changed the marketing line. It'll be, buy this game and you may complain.
There you go.
Yeah. Buy this game and please complain.
And please complain.
Please complain.
Because you're
Give
going
us your
to-
money and complain about it.
That's exactly right.
Give us your money and
They're
complain.
good with it so far. We might as well.
You might as well endorse it. Yeah, I like that strategy.
Yeah.
But
It's truth in advertising.
but here's what I would like to, for those of you who are playing, there's a streamer by the name of Caballero, and he was just streaming the other day. He's in Arteris, and it was the first time I've seen him ahead of me. And so I actually tweeted him back and said, beware, you're in there be dragons here. Because I've actually really enjoyed his streams and his comments. But what I'm now doing is I'm sort of chief playtester on the game. I bop around to events that I love, see you guys often at events and things, but when I'm not doing things with the community and I'm not otherwise doing team stuff, I actually play the game. And I'm doing basically the polish pass. I'm the one that's there to make sure this is a Lord British game. And that is a very slow, very meticulous process. And I make kinds of comments that no one else on the team does. Everybody else is finding bugs, but I'm saying no, that we're not trapping karmic truth, love, or courage things enough, or I can't find lead into this quest easily enough, or whatever it might be that makes it a Lord British style product is something that uniquely makes me employable. And so if you have played recently, starting a new character, going to Solace Bridge, talking to Edvard,
Yes.
going to Sultan, solving all the things in Sultan, even some new subquests he doesn't know about.
All right, now I got to go back.
And headed over to Arteris. That's as far as I have gotten with my polish pass. So if you go through that space and you don't believe it fulfills the quality level that you would have expected from me based on our past works together, then complain to me, because that means I have made a mistake. If that part meets your expectation, then please have faith. The rest of the game will too. But that's where we are, and I'm currently in Arteris. I think Arteris, where I'm at Polish Pass, is still very broken. Not only technically, there's guards with no names, and other literal physical malfunctions hither and yon. But it also still does not yet sing to the proper level of crafting that I think is either in Tracy's brilliant original story, nor in the craftiness of what I think makes a game worthy of being a spiritual successor to the Ultima series. But that's sort of where we are.
I'm over here singing in my head. I'm sorry. I've been to Arteris with a guard with no name. I said I was a writer, not a lyricist. So.
Could be worse.
Yeah, actually, and there's I mistakenly said that Richard lied earlier. That was a joke, because Richard does not lie. Richard is one of the most ethical people that I know. I love working with him for that reason. And if he tells you that and I can tell you, I know that there is nobody working harder to make this game right than Richard is. And he leads the way on that all the way. So yeah, it's going to be great.
Thank you. I hope so too, and I hope you all think so too. But I actually think that's sort of my broad status update. I haven't even been paying attention to time.
Oh, we can ask for questions.
But that's what I was going to do. Yeah, we only have 15 minutes left. So why don't we take that mic and put it near the center, or we'll leave it there? There's a mic there. If anybody has some questions, why don't they go to that mic?
Line up over here. We'll take questions.
Or don't line up, just form a mob, we're good with that too.
Winfield.
Fight for the mic.
So how do you two fill in the gaps for your developers to make your stories real in the game where they need to be made more real and there's not enough content in the book, as an example? How do you do that?
Interesting. So I can describe what it is in Shroud of the Avatar. You might be able to also comment like on how the void stuff too.
Well, in terms of content in terms of content, the outlines and structures that we work with are often in words, and words are an inherently light form of data. The Shroud of the Avatar, or the Blade of the Avatar novel, for example, and we've got huge amounts of writing that we've done for the story background for Shroud of the Avatar. They're still words, and which means that they have to be interpreted. That the sights, the sounds, the smells, and the reality behind the words actually takes place in the white space in between those words. It's in that electric gap between the words where creation takes place. It's where creation takes place in the mind of the reader. As we were talking earlier, when people come to us and say, and they want to tell us about our book, they're not really telling us about our book. What they're telling us is about their performance of our book. The creative staff and that are coding the game and working on the visuals in the game and the content of the game are creative people, and so this is very much a collaborative effort. And so while I have a vision of the story and Richard has a vision of the story, part of the joy in the creation of something like this is allowing others to contribute their visions as well and to make it part of the whole. One of the great things about an MMORPG is your participation, your creation, and your contribution to making the world a living place, which, because of your participation and input, makes this world infinite in its unique quality. And so I don't, it's a matter of faith on my part that the people who are doing the work in the studio are contributing to a single vision. Not necessarily my vision, but a single vision that we're all a part of. Richard, working with Richard, it's been that way. It's not, it's a collaboration between us where each of us has our give and each of us has our take, and the result is better than the sum of its parts. That's why I think the book is so solid. It's also why I think the game and the background of the game is so solid. But this is also true then to the studio from my perspective. I would rather go in and take a look at a piece of art in the studio and say, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't see it that way, but it's really interesting. Let's follow that to where it takes us, as opposed to go in and just say, oh, no, that wasn't what I wanted. Go do something else. I work in creative environments where that's that way, and somebody will say, why don't you make this? And I'll go make it, and they'll say, that wasn't what I want. Do something else. Well, what do you want? Just not this. I
want to throw out three exact examples of the problem / solution. The hilt, the tomb of the Avatar, and the Brittany suburbs. The reason why I mention those is that they're all for different reasons. Hilt is a place that has a deep description in the book. When one of those kind of things come up, I know to give that piece of work to Scott Jones, because Scott Jones is a militant about his desire to adhere to the canon that exists wherever it is found. So much so, though, that it means he's not remotely the fastest person on the team. In fact, that's our struggle, is his quality will always be the best. His canonness will always be the best. But it also means he's going to run way long on whatever it is that he tackles. So we give him the most important, most detailed areas. Then you go to, the other one I mentioned was the Tomb of the Avatar, which is also referenced in the book. It's one of the first big scenes of the book. The gentleman that got that, Richard Mady, is the guy that blocked that one out. If you look at the description of the book, it still doesn't say that much about it. There's not we don't spend as much time in that space, and we don't really explore how much more space there might be in and around it. And so, and on the blockout diagram that exists for the main story outside of Blade of the Avatar is thin. It's the bullet points again. It's like 10 bullet points at most. And so he just went off and built it. And then when I came back to him, I was surprised. It was a much bigger complex than in my mind's eye. I was just meaning a room. I just meant the room. And he built like an entire underground complex. And I was like, well, more power to you. And the players would probably really like it. But I think you really needed was the tomb. And but I think that it's going to, in the end, he was again using his creativity to go well beyond it. And then the third case we have is the suburbs of Brittany, for which there is no. The block diagram has no guidance whatsoever to the designers. However, I have a very strong personal opinion of what makes good design. And one of the things I always have to work with on our designers is to beat them into submission to the idea that before they go start to build any map, they not only have read whatever might be in the book, and they might have gone and read what might be in the block diagram, but they have to then sit down and actually have a brainstorm session with me personally. And the reason why is not because I have any idea necessarily as to what that suburb should be, but I want to make sure that what their idea for the suburb meets my kind of quality and style and I want to make sure it fits into the whole in a way that if I had sat down to try to lead them through some design process, that they would meet up with that. And by the way, as probably every team does, we occasionally struggle with that. People will, either I'm in New York or I'm traveling and they can't get a hold of me and they need to get started, so they just go get started. And then I'll come back to it and go like, well, it's nice, but I think you ran off into the weeds in this other area and we worked to get it back on track. But that's just part of the process, and it differs for different areas of the game. And there are, as you would understand, building a virtual world is gigantic. There are parts of the game that I still have not seen. There's probably parts of the game I will never see. I mean, with Ultima Online, there are parts of the world I never, ever, to this day, have ever seen. And that's just because it's so large. But that's why, we need so many eyes and ears on all the parts and pieces. We need people to speak up going like, I'm not sure that's what Richard would have intended, is to, go off in that direction. But we have processes in place that I think try to watch out for that. But again, final word on that is, it's okay to break canon. What was necessary to make a book work for linear prose, sometimes, Frank, like going back to Hilt, when Scott Jones showed me his original thing, okay, here's what I've extracted from the book, and we all went like, oh, that's going to be so hard. This can either just be too big, it's going to be too much space, it's not going to be as fun to play through these, you have to just walk through all this stuff that's not going to be fun to interact in, or whatever it might be. We just go, okay, well, here's where I grant you license to change from the words in the book, even though the people who read the book will notice there's a change, but that's okay. Yeah, I know. Actually, and for Scott, it rubs him. Yeah, he doesn't like to do it, so he will often go put it in the original way anyway, just because he feels like he has to. But yeah.
All right. First off, love the book. Want the second one now. But one of the major things that touched me in the book is the fact that he's got this sword that changes him. Will we as players ever get to have or earn a avatar blade that comes with us through our journeys and changes, revealing our part of the story in this whole deal through Shroud of the Avatar, the actual game, as opposed to the book?
So that, by the way, a number of people have recently have begun to ask similar questions. And so episode 1 does not include your ability to acquire such a blade. You will, however, be acquiring some other prophetic, incredibly powerful artifacts through this story arc. But I like that idea very much, and so that is something we'll take into consideration for episode 2. But it likely, that particular suggestion probably won't make episode 1.
One of the challenges that we have in creating Shroud of the Avatar is that there are so many things that we would like to say, and there's so many things that we see in the future for this world, but we can't put everything in episode 1. And so many really great and wondrous things we look forward to in the subsequent episodes. And that's kind of hard on us because we want to share all the fun stuff up front. But
I just added the Jira to be sure. So for those of you who know, that's how we have our team works on a backlog system called Jira, and so once it's captured in Jira, it will eventually happen.
yes,
It becomes canon.
and it becomes law.
It becomes law.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you had gone through basically the first 2 cities in the story. What percentage of all the story is that, and how long did it take you?
It takes me a long time to go through it. In fact, I've started a new process because I'm now out of those first areas. I've started playing offline for the first time, and the reason why is because I make save games. So I now have a save game post those first 2 cities, so that I don't have to repeat those. I can now repeat those in 2 or 3 hours to get all the way through it. But for me to get to where I am, I want to make sure I've literally hit every single solitary subquest that exists. And so, and that means I have to know every single one that exists. And so, one of the things I thought was interesting is, we originally said we want the story to be somewhere between 40 hours and 100 hours of gameplay, knowing that it's still inconsequential compared to people's time in a virtual world that's like an MMO. Having now played through those first 2 towns, I think we have a much bigger story than I thought, especially with the subquests that are in there. The story will take hundreds, plural, of hours to complete for a normal player if you really do them all, is my current estimate. But I've spent already now, all of the previous week prior to coming to here, I've been focused on nothing but Arteris. So it will probably take me about a week per town, and there's 40 towns, which means I wouldn't finish before we need to ship. And so what I'm training now is my understudy, which is Rebecca Holtrip, Rick Holtrip's wife. Rick is our associate producer. His wife is sort of becoming my second, so that she can help me pick up that pace and try to get him polished off faster than 1 per week. But my personal pace right now is about 1 per week.
As for what percentage of the game that is?
So for me right now, yeah, it's actually less than that. What did you say, percent? You said?
Well, if it's 40 and you've
Yeah,
done
2.
that's
That's it. Yeah, they're correct.
We're going to go with that number.
That number, 240.
20th of it, yeah.
Hello.
Hello again.
One, I wanted to thank you, Lord British, for the help and advice you've given over the last year, both directly and indirectly for a lot of stuff I've been working on. 2 questions split. Well, actually, not direct, but anyways.
2.
A lot of game developers talk about, okay, the tech wouldn't let us do this. We had this idea, tech won't let us. You hear it over and over again. Have you ever been surprised by what tech will let you do?
Oh yeah, no, in fact, there are a lot of solutions that come up with tech. I'll give you one example on both sides. First of all, the one that tech is telling us we can't do right now, that we've just changed a major rule of the game, is we have planned on being able to play completely offline, so solo player offline, solo player online, party-based online, friends-only online, and then open to the MMO-like full world. It turns out one of those is proving to be incredibly problematic, and that is friends online. So Party Online works great because you are literally opting into being a closed group. And a closed group we can easily manage because you're either in that group or you're out of that group. The friends one is much more complex because I could be your friend, he could be your friend, but we may not be friends. And now how do you sort that in a slightly indeterminate way? And we planned on just saying we understand that that's indeterminate, we'll just have a favoritism scale. But it turns out that that is turning out to be much more problematic than we had estimated it to be. And so we've, at least for the moment, removed it. So there's one of the major play modes we literally have just turned off in the game. And whether it stays off forever or comes back depends on what tech tells us. But the reverse happens all the time, especially with things like for example, in the crafting system. The tech guys often will sit down and go, you know, we won't realize that there is low-hanging fruit on how data can be stored. So tech has come in all the time and said things like, well, you don't need weapons to be the same in that sense. You can have a unique name, or it can have a unique history. It can have even like the maker's marks that are on every piece of gear in the game. It was really tech that came up and suggested that. They're just going like, the data structure allows this, even though you didn't request it. I'm guessing you would like something like that, or it might be something to consider. And so, I'm a big believer that classically in a team you have artists, designers, and programmers. But I think programmers are usually pretty good designers. And in fact, I've gotten in trouble in the press before for being critical of designers. But what I was really just trying to say is that design is hard, and having been a programmer helps you be a good designer. And so I like letting our programmers get involved in design.
You have to be careful what you say to a designer and a programmer, because you can say, I was thinking it'd be really nice if this, and they go away and build it. But they don't wait to be told to do it, they just go build it.
That is so true. I get in so much trouble with the team. Star reprimands me all the time for expressing my thoughts, because because everyone on the team takes it as a mandate. And so, you have to be super careful. That's very good point.
It's true.
Star says, run your thoughts past me first.
Right.
Like, that might be interesting, all of a sudden.
And then somebody goes and takes it a direction and wastes a week on doing something.
Yeah, it's true. All you have to do is say, I wish that, and then they go and fulfill it or try to.
Right, and instead of what's on their actual schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to be worried? Well, you said that. No, I didn't actually. Yeah, I've had that. We both had that conversation.
But Richard said.
The other half, real quick, with the Void. I work in digital humanities. I am a historian. It's what I do. Have you considered doing historical projects with this?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, a couple of the projects that I have. See, I've got all kinds of things I'd love to build in the Void. I'd like to do a noir that's all black and white.
I have something you might be interested in.
I'd like to. I was working on one thing for a time, which was a time travel photo quest.
I definitely have something you're interested in.
Where you'd have to go back while the asteroid was coming down and take a picture of dinosaurs, right? or go to the court of Akhenaten and take pictures of it while it was standing and is beautiful and still painted, right? I personally especially wanted to be at Tranquility Base and have the LEM standing there and be able to be on the moon, and your objective was to get a picture of both Neil and Buzz together, right? All of which are easily doable in the Void. I once was in Boston, and I went to the location where they had the big meeting before the Tea Party. For some reason I can't remember the name. And they had school children there. And they'd given each of them a little script of the speech that the person who sat there had said. And I thought, what a wonderful experience for these kids. But I could do that in the Void. I could do that in the Void with everybody in period dress and looking like the person who was sitting there and delivering those lines. And what a wonderful, impactful thing that would be, to be able to go to moments in history. I could recreate Ford's Theater. Okay. and to be able to be present in those moments. In fact, one of the business models that we have for the Void is to use it for school trips during the day, when it's not a time for, it's not an peak entertainment time, but it'd be a wonderful time to bring in classrooms full of children, and take them to these moments in history and allow them to experience them.
One of the projects that I'm working on is actually a digital recreation of an entire street block of downtown Atlanta during the 1940s. We have high-resolution photographs of the entire street. We're building the entire street in fully textured everything, and it's 3D interactable right now, and it's actually built.
And wouldn't it be great to be in that space,
Exactly.
untethered, moving through the space, and not only doing that, but meeting people from the period and hearing them talk about their time.
And being able to get the environment of it, and that's
Yeah.
And it's a really cool project, and I'm really happy about it, but that would make it so much cooler.
Well, all right, we are at a little beyond our time limit. And I have something else coming up in 20 minutes myself, so that I got to get through. I hope the parade's done.
I do too.
Anyway, thank you all so much.
Thank
really
you,
do appreciate
everybody.
it.